Now, if you look around the internet, you'll notice that one of the most common questions that vegetable growers want to know is, what vegetables can I sow and when can I sow them? But of course, that's really complicated to answer because we live in so many different locations and so many varied climates that it isn't a one size fits all. And sometimes we'll watch a video, say on YouTube, and then we'll get towards the middle or the end of it and then realise that the person who's presenting that video is from a completely different part of the world and therefore their climate is different. However, I've tried to address that problem, so no matter what part of the world you're from, whether it's from the UK like myself, or whether from the USA or Canada or other parts of Europe or anywhere in the world, with certain information you'll be able to understand what you should sow and when you should sow it on a month by month basis. And that's what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to show you my brand new and updated sowing and planting calendar for 2024 and show you some of the key information I've added to this to make it usable in virtually any part of the world. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video and I'll show you how you can get a completely free copy of my sowing and planting calendar for yourself. Now, I'm sure, like myself, many of you vegetable growers out there have got a wide selection of vegetable seeds that you've got stored ready for the next season. That's exactly what I've got here. I've got packets and packets of them in my storage case here, and trying to sort them out, try and work out what I need to sow and when I need to sow it will be really time consuming. And if I had to open every single box and look at every single packet every season, it would be a really time consuming process. And of course that makes it difficult for planning as well, because how do I plan what I need to sow in the future? And in order to do that, I needed to find a way in which I could put all of that information into one single place. And that is where my sowing and planting calendar was born a few years ago. And over the years, I've continued to add vegetables and different varieties to the calendar to a point now where it's a really usable resource. And when I look at my calendar, I can see at the top, I've got all the week commencing dates right from the 1st of January to the very last week in December for the whole year. And I can also look down at the different vegetables that I want to grow on the left hand side and then track across to find out through colour coding when I need to sow the seeds. Do they need to be indoors? Can they be sown outside? When are they planted out? And when are they harvested? So currently there's quite a number of different pages showing you different type of vegetables on each page, so it's really useful. Now, of course, all of the information contained in my sowing and planting calendar is perfectly fine for me because it's designed for where I am and for my climate. And when I've given previous versions of my calendar away, I always get comments from other people from other parts of the world saying exactly that. Well, fine, but how does it relate to my particular zone? However, I asked myself, what could I add to the calendar that would help people in other growing zones, other hardiness zones, to be able to adapt it, to understand what vegetables they could sow at what times of the year? So I'm pleased to say that there's one or two new features that I've added to the calendar. And if you can understand just a few simple steps, no matter what hardiness zone or what climate or what location you are in the world, it will make it easier for you to be able to grow your vegetables. And one of the most fundamental things to understand is temperature. Clearly there's a wide range of temperatures on different climates all around the world, but germination temperatures don't really change. So for example, certain types of vegetable seeds like certain temperatures in order to germinate. And that would not make any difference if you're in the cold environment of the northern hemisphere or the warmer environment of the southern hemisphere. The germination temperatures are fundamentally the same, and that's what I've added to the calendar. So the first thing I've added is germination temperature, so you can see at what temperature is needed in order to start your seeds off, in order to help them to germinate. And if you decide to start your seeds in an internal environment, that is much easier to control. So temperatures that need a higher germination temperature, say peppers or tomatoes or vegetables of that nature, you might start them off in a propagator, for example, or somewhere where there's a nice warm temperature. However, if you want to start your seeds directly outdoors, it's completely different because now you're relying on the soil temperature outside, which is much more difficult to control. Now, if you live in the UK, you could use the information that's already on this calendar with just one or two slight alterations. So for example, if you live in the north of the UK, maybe Scotland or the northeast or the northwest or Northern Ireland, you might add a couple of weeks on to the dates shown in this calendar because it's a little bit colder for longer in those locations. But what about if you're outside the UK in a completely different climate or completely different hardiness zone? Well, the way I've addressed that is to add another new feature to the calendar where, in this particular example here, this is for the USA, where you'll notice I've looked at all of the various hardiness zones and given you on a month by month basis what the average temperatures are in those particular zones. And within this, I've also included the last predicted frost dates for each of the zones. And this should help you, because if you look at the germination temperatures in the main calendar, you can work out what temperatures needed. And if you do want to sow your seeds outdoors, you can look along this chart to find out which month is going to be the best time to sow those seeds based upon average temperatures. I've also done the same for Canada as well. So there's another feature here for the Canadian Hardiness plant zones, as they're called in Canada, and it includes exactly the same type of information. So you can utilise this in exactly the same way by going to the main calendar, maybe picking some of the varieties of vegetables that you would like to grow, have a look at the germination temperatures, and if you are planning to sow those seeds outdoors, you can use this chart in exactly the same way I've just explained for the USA. This also includes last predictive frost dates. Now, the last predictive frost dates are important because that will be the time after that point where you can start to think about sowing seeds directly outdoors, or even transplanting seedlings that you've started indoors, so you know by that point the risk of frost has gone. So in this latest version of the calendar, I've included last predictive frost dates for different parts of the UK, and also last predictive frost dates for each of the USDA hardness zones in the United States, and also each of the hardiness plant zones in Canada. Also, in response to feedback I've had from previous versions of the calendar from people who have received it, they loved it, but they said, can you add this vegetable onto your calendar? And that's what I've done. So now you'll find things like asparagus, artichokes, melons, and other things that I don't normally grow myself, but other people obviously do. And now they're included and added within the latest version of the calendar. And just one final point about the calendar in relation to the temperatures that are shown. These are soil temperatures, not air temperatures. That's really important to know, because there can be a big difference between air temperature and soil temperature. So in order, for example, for the seeds to germinate at these temperatures here, it's the soil that needs to be at these temperatures, not the air outside. Also, you'll notice the temperatures in a range given in centigrade and in Fahrenheit, not as a single number. And that will mean that the seeds will start to germinate at the lower temperature, but as the temperature starts to increase, the rate of germination is likely to be better. So at the lower end of the range, you might get slower germination, but you will still get germination. As the temperature warms up, you'll get a faster rate of germination. So if you're looking for an optimum germination temperature, you might want to look at something in the middle of the range that I've given within the calendar. Now, this update has taken many months to produce because it took quite a lot of research in order for me to look at the different climates around the world to gather information that will be useful and relevant. So I do hope you find it useful. So in order to get your completely free copy of my 2024 Sowing and Planting Calendar, all you need to do is click on the link which will be in the video description below, and you'll be able to download a copy for yourself. And when you do that, you'll notice something else that I've done in relation to feedback from previous versions, and that's created this in PDF. And the reason that people tend to want this calendar in PDF, it's much easier to print. If you do want to print out a copy of this calendar, then it's best printed on A3 in colour. And depending upon your printer, there may be settings that you might need to press, such as scale to fit or fit to page. If you do print it out, it should be in around about 8 to 9 pages. Now, as I previously mentioned, the calendar is completely free. It's a completely free resource, and even if it doesn't suit your requirements exactly, or you might have to do 1 or 2 adaptations, hopefully there's enough information included on this calendar to help you. So I know the calendar isn't going to be perfect for everybody in every climate zone, because believe me, that will be really difficult to achieve. But I do really hope that you find the latest version of this calendar really useful, and I'd love to know where you are in the world. If you could pop a comment below and let me know which part of the world you're in, it'd be great to see who is using the calendar in different parts of the world and different climates. And I really hope you've enjoyed the video and find it useful, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, vegetables and flowers, and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. I'll see you all on the next video.